Hi, I'm Mari Frank. Thank you for listening to KUCI. This week is Fun Drive Week. KUCI brings you wonderful music and public affairs shows 24/7. We give you the gift of listening, and now we ask you to give your pledge gift. It's tax deductible. When you call in your gift, you will also be eligible to receive a pledge gift from KUCI. Most of all, you will help to continue the great shows. So thank you for calling 824-5824 KUCI. Make your tax deductible donation right now by calling 824-5824. Thank you.
The opinions and views expressed in this program do not reflect those of KUCI, its management, or the UC Board of Regents. To find out more about this talk show or other talk shows broadcasting on KUCI, log on to our website at kuci.org or check out the latest program guide.
Good morning. You're listening to KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, California, streaming online at kuci.org and podcasting on iTunes. Welcome to Fighting for Love. This show will help you turn conflict into collaboration in all your relationships. I'm Lloyd, the show's engineer, and your host is Mari Frank, an attorney mediator since 1985. She's a mediator for the Orange County Superior Court Civil Mediation Panel. Mari's a professor of negotiations and conflict management and has been a certified state bar trainer for over 25 years. To learn more about the show and our great guests, please visit conflicthealing.com. Mari, what's your show about this morning?
Well, Lloyd, today our show is about emotions, and everybody has emotions. Some manage them better than others, and some have a lot of problems with emotions. And some people don't think that they have emotions. They think that they're just like Mr. Spock, but that's not true. Everybody has emotions. So we're going to be talking about them, and I have this wonderful book that I've been reading. It's called It's Not Always Depression. And then the subtitle is Working the Change Triangle to Listen to the Body, Discover Core Emotions, and Connect to Your Authentic Self. And this is by Hilary Jacobs Hendel. She is an LCSW coming to us from New York, and we're very excited to have her with us this morning. And so let me tell you a little bit about her and her book. She received her BA in biochemistry from Wesleyan University and an MSW from Fordham University. She's a certified psychoanalyst and AEDP psychotherapist and supervisor. We're going to find out what that AEDP is. She's published articles in the New York Times and professional journals, and she also consulted on the psychological development of characters on AMC's Mad Men. And she lives in beautiful New York City, where my son lives as well. So thank you so much for joining us this morning, Hilary.
Thank you, Mari, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
What is AEDP?
AEDP, which stands for Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy, is a type of therapy that I discovered kind of by luck that is really steeped in emotion theory, trauma theory, and healing, and how people really transform quickly as opposed to kind of the typical Freudian analysis that goes on. And it was very appealing to me when I was first exposed to it, and then I became trained in it, and it's how I practice now.
How wonderful. Is it anything like cognitive behavioral therapy?
It's actually what I would call the opposite, in that cognitive behavioral therapy is focusing on the thoughts that you have, right, and trying to change how your feelings and your behaviors as they're working with your thoughts. It's a method that is top, meaning the cerebral cortex working its way down, type of processing. And AEDP and other trauma therapies like it are called bottom-up processing therapies, where you're focusing on emotions and the body, which is a very efficient way of working because of the way the brain is organized and the way it's formed, that it's really a secret that I believe needs to be shouted at the rooftops, that we all need to become familiar with emotions as physical experiences.
Right, that's fascinating. I've been doing all this research on the brain, and I do programs for attorneys on emotional intelligence and mindfulness and all this stuff. So I'm going to have to look into that. That's so exciting. Very exciting.
Yes, it is.
So-
I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about how it is that you decided to write this book. It's Not Always Depression, and why did you call it that name?
Yeah, two great questions. Well, it was really just good fortune. What happened is my children grew up and left the house. This was about 2000 and around 2014, and I had all this extra time on my hands, so I started writing a bit more. And there was a column in the New York Times that was called Couch, and it was about therapy, and therapists and patients or clients in therapy would write in op-eds type of thing, and I would read it religiously. I was interested in everything, and one day I said to my husband, I think that I'm going to try to write something for the Couch column because I had a story to tell. I felt that would help other people. And the name that the editor at the New York Times gave the article was It's Not Always Depression.
Oh.
And it was about working with someone who had a long-standing, what they called treatment-resistant depression, had been on every medication, cocktail, every type of therapy, except the type of therapy that I do, and trauma therapies. And when he came to me, I said, let's not do what was already done and expect different results. So I reconceptualized him as someone who suffered from trauma, in particular childhood neglect, and he got better. And it was early on in my AEDP career, so even I was like, wow, that is amazing. And I wrote about it. The Times published it, and it went viral. It was I'm proud to say it was the #1 emailed on March 15th, 2015, or March 10th, and it was the #2 article read in the Times. And because of that, I was approached by a couple of agents to write a book. It had never occurred to me before. And I said there was this triangle that I learned about that I felt everybody could benefit from. I never dreamed I'd have a chance to write about it, but when I did, I took it. I took the opportunity.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So kind of let's get into that because that's part of your subtitle, Working the Change Triangle. So can you kind of explain all that and get people excited enough that they want to read your book?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so exciting because, in terms of excitement, what we're talking about here is a model that anybody can use either by themselves, with their partner, with friends, in peer groups, and with a therapist that has a map of how you get from a disconnected, upset state of suffering back down to feeling calm, regulating the body, feeling connected to your authentic self, and being able to then communicate with others from an authentic place. So that, to me, is extremely exciting because having grown up in New York City with my father was a psychiatrist, and we were a very psychologically oriented family. I didn't even realize that I really didn't have any idea what emotions were and what I was supposed to do with them, except to understand my feelings and behaviors through insight. But it didn't really leave a lot of what to do when you're anxious, how to feel better.
Right.
So what this triangle does in a nutshell is, if you imagine an upside-down triangle, with the point of the triangle kind of around your belly button, at the bottom of the triangle are these things called core emotions, which are the pre-wired, inborn survival emotions that Charles Darwin and William James wrote about in the turn of the century, really. And these are there, they've evolved so that the human beings could survive, which means that when something in the environment happens, so back in the dawn of time, let's say a saber-toothed tiger or any type of animal was running towards you, the human body had to be able to react faster than the brain could think.
Right.
So emotions, core emotions, and let me quickly tell you what they are because your audience will recognize them. Core emotions, which are this very special subset of emotions, are anger, sadness, fear, disgust, joy, excitement, and sexual excitement. And when something happens in the environment that matters, these emotions get triggered, and they tell us, they're like a compass for what's happening. They let us know if something is good or bad for us, if we need to run, if we want to move towards something. So when you see a wild animal coming at you, fear gets ignited because you've looked at something, you've seen it through your senses, or you've heard something moving. So the five senses pick up what's happening in the environment, and they send a signal to the middle of the brain, and which activates an emotion. At no point now are you conscious that you're having a feeling, and at no point now do you have control over whether this emotion will happen or not. It's just going to happen. And from the middle of the brain, it's going to send a signal down to your organs in your body and ready you for an action that is meant to be adaptive for survival. So you'll start running if there's an animal charging at you, and then when you get to safety, it'll be then that you'll be able to reflect and say, I'm that just scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And you'll look to see if the danger's gone, and then your body will relax.
Yeah, it's that fear, freeze, or flight, right?
Exactly.
And it gets that amygdala, those two little almond-shaped amygdala get all crazy. That's our, in that primitive area, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in modern life, we could say they get crazy because they react to fears that aren't there. But
Right.
really the way they're meant to be is so uncrazy, just so practical.
Right.
Let my body take an action, and let that action help me survive.
Right, right.
So the first thing that was so important that I would want your listeners to know is that we are raised in our culture to believe that we are supposed to control our emotions, or that we're weak for having emotions, or we're crazy for having emotions. And in fact, emotions are not under conscious control. Men and women and cultures all over the world and races, everybody has the same core emotions, and it's really lovely because it's what unites us all as people of the earth.
Right.
So those are core emotions, and when we can listen to those emotions without being afraid of them, and listen to the sensations that they create in our body, feel them without being frightened, they're uncomfortable at times, they tell us a lot about what we need to know. They tell us half of the picture, and the other half is our thoughts, which are very important too. So we're not talking about not having thoughts or being, just wearing your emotions on your sleeve, but we're talking about a balance of using thoughts and emotions to navigate challenges in the world. So that's the bottom of the triangle.
Mm-hmm.
The top of the triangle is what happens when we feel something and we avoid it, or we're scared of it. And so the corners of the top of the triangle are, one corner is in these things called inhibitory emotions.
All right, I see that on the right. I'm looking
Yes.
at your book right now. Uh-huh.
Exactly. And everyone will recognize those inhibitory emotions. They are anxiety, guilt, and shame.
Mm-hmm.
And those are there largely to civilize us. They keep us connected to our groups, so that if you take anger, for example, which is an emotion that most people struggle with, when we don't want to be acting on our anger in terms of the impulses. So if somebody annoys you, you don't want to swat them or start screaming at them. And the way we sort of learn to squelch those impulses is with our conscious, and that's why we have these feelings in small amounts like anxiety, guilt, and particularly guilt and shame, which keep us connected to each other and in good social graces.
Right.
The problem is we're over-reliant on those in modern life because for a variety of reasons, that people end up having too much guilt, having too much shame, and that's what begins to cause psychological symptoms. Anxiety is kind of a special case because anxiety arises when we have an emotion that we also learned was unacceptable. So if as a little kid, when you, let's say you're a little boy and you start crying and your father says, boy, man up, you're not supposed to cry because that's what the father was taught. There's like the body can constrict and can from then on inhibit the emotion of fear, and what will happen is the child will then experience an anxiety or guilt or shame. It could be any one of those inhibitory emotions. Everybody's different. And so the last corner on the top is defenses, which is any move. It could be a behavior, it could be a thought process like ruminating or obsessing or worrying, or it could be even another emotion, something that is used to avoid what's really happening, what's happening at the core of one's experience.
Or burying it, right?
Burying it. I mean, we talk about repression.
Yeah.
So the experience, some people think about it as burying it. Some people think about it as kind of cordoning it off or exiling it.
Denial, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
denial is so the defenses there's an infinite number of creative ways that people use defenses to protect themselves, really. And I don't think of defenses, and I wasn't trained this way, to think of them as something wrong that you're doing, but that these are creative ways that the mind and body help us cope with unbearable pain, emotional pain. And they range from just when someone's a little bit uncomfortable, and if we're talking about conflicts in couples, avoiding, changing the subject,
right.
Looking away, walking away, to using alcohol and drugs to numb pain, to all the way on to the psychological diagnoses that we see in the DSM-5 personality disorders, cutting, even depression. I think of as a defense in a way, certain types of depression, because they kind of squash your whole system so that you lose touch with your vitality and your emotions that tell you what you want, because at some point having emotions caused problems. They were either not welcomed in society in some way, family, or showing emotions led to shame or humiliation or something like that. So this triangle, we are always somewhere on the triangle at any given point in the day, or this place that we all want to spend more time in, which I diagram below the change triangle, which is a calm and regulated, peaceful state where we feel kind of open-hearted, and you're there because there's all these C words that help describe this state of open-hearted calmness. One tends to feel compassion for themselves and others, curious in the world around them and curious about other people, connected to themselves and connected to others, creative, confident, and calm. So you can look for these C words and try to know where you stand relative to the open-hearted state, which is where you want to be when you're having tough conversations. And unfortunately, some people have never even experienced that state, since they were young, because they've had a life full of adversity or trauma.
Right. So this is beautiful. So then, how do we get from this, the core emotions and looking at this triangle, to get to that point of that open-hearted state where we feel calm, all the C's, calm, confident, courageous, everything?
Yes. So the easiest way to explain it is to think of it when you have a core emotion. So again, you're walking, let's say you're in your car because you're in California, and somebody cuts you off, and it might trigger anger, right?
Right.
So
or fear if you think you're going to get in an accident. Yeah.
Exactly. And we could also talk about the positive emotions, but we'll do the ones that feel better. But we'll do that in a minute. But
okay.
let's say you realize that you are angry, which is really the first step. Is I have to help people even recognize what they're feeling often. But let's say that anger is triggered, whether you're aware of it or not, because these things can happen consciously or unconsciously. So once a core emotion is triggered in the brain and body, we're at a fork in the road. One way is to avoid it, which we're moving up the triangle, kind of up to the defense anxiety pole.
Right.
So we're avoiding it with whatever defenses we use, or we just start to get anxious. The other road we could take is to tend to that emotion and experience that emotion and listen to that emotion so that we don't block it and the energy can move through us so that we then enter back into this calm, open-hearted state. So you can think of it as kind of energy that either gets trapped and squished and kind of causes stress in the mind and body, or energy that gets released. And I know I'm talking to someone in California, so as a New Yorker, I would have to qualify. I'm not talking about energy necessarily in the woo-woo kind of touchy-feely, new agey sense, even though I don't want to offend anybody, but that's where I came from, this kind of intellectual, scientific background. We didn't talk about energy in my family. They would have scoffed at that. So, but there is a physics to emotions. They literally do have put pressure, and they want to come up and be released. So that anger would come up and want to be released, and person A might say, unconsciously, we don't do anger. Anger got us into trouble in the past, so we just immediately squash it down. And another person who understands about emotions might instead say, okay, the car nearly cut me off. I am pissed off at this person. So that means they can name that I am angry.
Right.
They can sense, okay, this anger I start to feel. I feel it in my belly. I feel an energy coming up. They can name the impulse as they stay with the physical feeling. My impulse is to shout profanities at this person, but I don't want to behave that way, but I know that's what I feel like doing.
Right.
And instead, I might then breathe through it. I use fantasy a lot with patients who have a lot of rage, that we can use fantasy and imagine the impulse, not as a dress rehearsal of anything we would actually do in life, but the brain has this kind of interesting advantage of not knowing the difference between fantasy and reality. So you can use fantasy therapeutically to discharge the energy of anger. So I teach people to do that on their own so that they can behave well in their relationships and at work and still not block the emotions, which will then eventually make them more anxious or depressed or develop other psychological symptoms. So there's many, many skills that we can learn to help us release emotions and return to a state of calm.
Yeah.
And health.
I have a little acronym that I use, and it's called hard loving. And it teaches you how to deal with, because as a mediator, I deal with people who are angry all the time because they're in some kind of conflict. Either they're getting a divorce, or it's a partnership dissolution, or there's some business dispute, or an estate dispute. And one of the things that I teach them is, this thing, and attorneys, is hard love. And so H stands for halt. You feel an emotion, halt. And then the next letter is A for anger management. To really feel it, go into your body, feel it. Some people feel it in their shoulders. Some people feel it in their solar plexus. Some people's face gets on fire. So that's what I call the A, anger management, is to recognize where you feel it in your body. R is to reverse that reaction, meaning breathe into it and breathe whatever is you're feeling. If I feel like there's a knife in my solar plexus, I'd reverse it by pulling out that knife gently, and there wouldn't be any blood.
Yep.
And what is D? I forgot. Now I'm getting all confused. D is to be not defensive. Not defensive, right. Don't defend. Yes. And then loving would be listen to what they're saying. O would be to ask objective questions. So I'll send that to you because I think you'll get a kick out of it. But that's what I've done, but without thinking necessarily about all the psychological things, but thinking about what works, that it's body, mind, and spirit that's all together, but especially body and mind. All these chemicals rage. You get that this testosterone starts, spewing out, right? And cortisol. And when you get angry, all of these chemicals start creating action or feelings in our bodies, right? And tension. And so, so that really kind of blends with what I've been, yours is a little more sophisticated than mine, but it's similar.
It's the same principles. Yes, absolutely, it's similar. Yeah.
Yeah,
because the principles are the same. They're universal for all humans, and the idea I think that you're getting at and that I'm getting at is that there's information and education that's not that difficult to digest that really can help. Again, this idea of just understanding that emotions are physical and you can't think your way through an emotion, that you have to learn a few different steps to connect to it in a different way, and everybody can learn those. Everybody.
Right. And I think what happens is, and I see this especially when people are in conflict, the major two types of core feelings are fear and anger.
Yes.
Those are the two that come up all the time, every day with all my clients.
Yeah.
And so that's the ones that they have to really recognize and feel, like what you're talking about is to kind of really recognize it, and then to, once they breathe into it, that helps so much to just breathe into it. What do you do with clients? Let's say you have somebody come in who's very, very anxious. So how do you go about helping them?
Well, the first thing that I do is I do a little bit of education. I show them the change triangle, and I let them know that anxiety is a signal and a cue. That's great because we have to find the underlying core emotions. So what causes anxiety are many emotions coming up at once, emotions that we think are unacceptable, and conflicts. So what I help them do, we would usually start with sort of a brief grounding and breathing exercise, because to start to perceive feelings, we have to slow down. And we're so sped up, people are so productive, they don't take a moment to really check in. So I teach people, let's just take a minute, feel your feet on the floor, ask if it's okay if we just slow down a little bit, and see if they can begin to name the core emotions that they're aware of under their anxiety. And sometimes I'll show them the list and we'll go through one by one. We're not even attaching it to a story yet. So I might say, do you notice any anger if you were to sort of to go deep on your deepest level? Yes, I notice some anger. Great. Do you notice any fear? Yes, I notice some fear. Do you notice any excitement? Well, yes, I notice some excitement. I'm excited to be here and to work on these things. So we name all the core emotions, and then I just say, can you imagine them? I kind of hold up my hands and say, we want to imagine each emotion separately with a lot of space and air around it, because each one of those emotions we're going to get to know. They each have their own program, and we need to listen to them, but one at a time, so you're not anxious anymore. And then we're listening. The emotions have so much information, again, that tell us how to be and what we need to do to feel better. And anxiety decreases just from being able to name the emotions underneath it. And sometimes the anxiety has to do with things going on in their present life, and often it's also dovetailing on things that happened in the past that were unresolved. Kind of the emotions are sitting there building up and getting more, creating more and more anxiety.
Well, would you believe we are out of time? I got so excited listening to you that we are I can't believe it. We are out of time. So I know.
Maybe I'll have to come back.
I know. So Hilary Jacobs Hendel is the author of this wonderful book, It's Not Always Depression. And just give your website and it's time to go.
It's thechangetriangle.com, or you can Google my name. And the book is easy to read, no jargon, very accessible with lots of stories that show how I do this with people and how you can do it on your own.
Well, thank you so much, and we will have you back again. All right, you've been listening to KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine and KUCI.org on the net. I'm Mari Frank. Join us every Monday morning and visit our website at conflicthealing.com. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Mari Frank. Thank you for listening to KUCI. This week is Fund Drive Week. KUCI brings you wonderful music and public affairs shows 24/7. We give you the gift of listening, and now we ask you to give your pledge gift. It's tax deductible. When you call in your gift, you will also be eligible to receive a pledge gift from KUCI. Most of all, you will help to continue the great shows. So thank you for calling 824-5824 UCI-KUCI. Make your tax deductible donation right now by calling 824-5824.